Welcome to Sports Talk. I am Vin Ebenau, and my guest today is New York Mets radio broadcaster Keith Raad from WCBS 880 in New York, getting ready for opening day, just over a week away. And Mets have been looking good in spring training. We're going to talk about what's been going on, some of the changes, and what the Mets could be looking like in the 24 season. So before we dive in, Keith, to what's going on across the diamond, I want to welcome you onto the show. Thanks for taking out the time.
Absolutely, Vin. Good to see you.
So you're coming off your own rookie season in Major League Baseball anyway. I know you came from the Brooklyn Cyclones, the Mets high A team, but last year, first year working Mets radio with Howie Rose. What was that whole experience like for you?
Yeah, it was a pinch me moment. I felt like it was a dream come true. I felt like at any moment they could have said, by June or July, all right, that's it. We were just kidding. You can go home now, and I would have been just fine. It was so cool to be able to travel around the country, to go to these amazing stadiums, to talk about the Mets for 3 hours a night. I know that the results on the field were one thing, but the actual experience of everything that in the minors, people are trying to make it to the majors, players and broadcasters, coaches, everybody. So it was a fulfillment of about 9 years in the minor leagues, and hopefully I'm up here to stay. That's the goal.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, wishing you all the best in that role. And I know from your years with the Cyclones and just being around the Mets minor leaguers, I mean, you got to know some of the guys that ended up getting called up to the big leagues. So, based on your relationship with some of the players, did that make some of that transition easier for you, and I guess in turn for them as well?
Yeah, the nice thing about just being with the Mets, you mentioned I was with the Cyclones. I was there probably for about 5 years, and so I had really met a lot of not just players but coaches, staff members, the people that work at St. Lucie that run spring training. I was in the Mets family for a while. I was the same employee as the Mets were, St. Lucie Mets. So just I knew a pretty good chunk of people. I'd been to spring training before, but then the actual clubhouse is all brand new. So it's the most difficult part is to kind of get these guys to they know who you are. They've seen your headshot. They
Sure.
know to look out for you, but to trust you. And I do remember last year during photo day, which is like one of the first days in spring training, uh, big media content day. Brett Beatty came up to me and gave me a big hug and said congratulations because I'd seen Brett when he was drafted at 19 years old when he had his baby fat, and now he's a chiseled adult human being. So those kind of things mean a lot because again, it's about the journey of where we were and where we would like to go, and to be there. And Francisco Alvarez is same deal, big hug. So it's very, very. It feels at home. It feels at home with this.
And some changes that the Mets made themselves in the offseason as well. Uh, David Stearns, now team president. Carlos Mendoza, the new manager coming over from the Yankees, most recently as a bench coach, but Mendoza had been there for a number of years, helping out with spring training and a number of other things. So some new looks to the Mets from the front office and from the dugout. What has the atmosphere been like around Mets spring training camp?
Yeah, so just based on last year, there was so many high expectations. Buck Showalter was running things. There was kind of a World Series or bust feeling, and that
Mm,
that I think made everybody a little bit uptight in the sense that hey, we've got a job to do. If we don't go all the way, we're going to fail. And it certainly they didn't go all the way. But
right.
this year, it really is the beginning of a new era. It's hard to split it in half with last year and this year because a lot of the same payroll carries over. But David Stearns is a really smart guy. He runs a pretty solid ship with his leadership style. He brought in Carlos Mendoza, who is kind of a breath of fresh air, a young and vibrant manager who's certainly a rookie manager, but somebody who you can tell has done this thing before, which is just basically run an operation. So I'd say the vibes are good. And when vibes are good, everybody's feeling good, and usually good things happen. But to create a vibe is kind of the big thing managers do outside of, you know, pitch hitting and pitching changes. So I think the vibes so far are solid.
Carlos Mendoza always struck me as the kind of guy that was like a silent leader in a way. Aaron Boone always praised him when he was on the Yankees coaching staff for his knowledge of the game and for the way he went about things. What has it been like in getting to know Mendoza and just kind of seeing him work and I guess develop a new kind of atmosphere or a new kind of energy, a new kind of vibe for this Mets ball club so that they know how to go out there and play this year.
Yeah, for him, I mean, whenever you move over from the number two chair to the number one chair, it's much different. Your relationship with players is a lot different going from bench coach to manager because bench coach you could kind of be buddies with these guys and talk about what dad has to say as the manager, but now he's El Jefe. But I think he's very well prepared for that because he has, like you said, he was with the Yankee system for a very long time, working his way up the chain. So he knows the kind of vibe that he wants to instill. He's open, he's honest. His big thing is communication with players, and that stuff you really don't see as a fan. That's the stuff behind closed doors that is impactful. One example is Brandon Nimmo. They would like to move Brandon Nimmo from center field to left field, which is a bit of an ego shock to somebody like Nimmo, who's paid very handsomely to play center field for the Mets. And the way that they've had to communicate with Nimmo to make sure he was okay with that, to kind of let him know, hey, this is our plan, but this is the way we're going to communicate it to you. I think that has been excellent because Brandon Nimmo is an amazing guy to begin with, but it seems like anything that the Mets want to do that might be a little bit different, they're getting out ahead of these things. Players are creatures of habit, so they're making sure that they handle communication. And then just on a personal level, I think Carlos, he looks you in the eye. He wants to know your name. Everybody that's from writers on down. And so I think he's doing a good job of at least establishing that, hey, I respect you. I politely ask for your respect in return. And I'd say that's a pretty good start for a manager.
Let's have a pretty good looking offense too. I mean, they didn't have to make a whole lot of changes there. I know they added a couple pieces like Joey Wendell who could play a number of positions, and then certainly with Harrison Bader in the outfield, who played for a little over a month and a half with the Reds last year, but for a year plus with the Yankees and obviously with the Cardinals before that. An outstanding center fielder, an elite defensive outfielder. I mean, it just amazes me every time to watch him, just his ability to track a fly ball and to run. And he kind of does that little like stride step, either going backwards or to his side to go track down a fly ball. And he's got a pretty good arm. And playing in a deep center field like Citi Field, I think will benefit Harrison Bader and the New York Mets. I mean, that's a pretty good defensive outfield with Bader, Nimmo, and even Starling Marte. So, I mean, how good are the Mets looking in the outfield, in your opinion?
Yeah, I do think that David Stearns' big emphasis was on defense and run prevention, which are two things that fans they don't care about that, to be honest with you. They want to see home runs and strikeouts, which I totally
Right.
get. But defense is the thing that separated the Milwaukee Brewers for about 9 years in the NL Central when Stearns was running the show. And I do think it'll pay dividends. It's just a very difficult thing for the fan to see because if I asked any Mets fan on the street who's watched the team, what do you think about Brandon Nimmo in center field? Man, he makes some electric plays and great diving catches, and he'll rob homers at the wall. And that's true because that's all the stuff that you see. But the stuff that you don't see is maybe he could have got to that ball and turned a double back into a single because of the strength of his arm, or tracking down a ball here or there a little bit better, or having a stronger throwing arm. But a Harrison Bader now moving to center field, you have a more elite player that maybe fans might start to see some things if you look deep for it that instead of a guy going first to third, he goes first to second. Those little tiny bases start to add up. And you put Nimmo in left field, and all of a sudden, offensively, he's one of the top 50, 40 players in baseball. He's now playing left field, a center fielder turned left fielder. And then Starling Marte, boy, if he stays healthy, if he's just healthy at all, baseline Starling Marte,
Right.
he's electric. And I know he's older, but I've stood next to this guy. He's as chiseled as they come. He's in amazing shape. What was going on beneath the surface last year was just he was tight. He had groin surgery and abdominal surgery. He wasn't himself.
Mm.
This year he's looking himself. So you put those three guys in the outfield, and then you add Tyrone Taylor, who's another great defensive outfielder who can play all three positions. All of a sudden, this outfield is sound. It's terrific, and it's just going to be interesting for Mets fans to kind of acknowledge and see that because I always say to people, who's the best defensive team in the majors? They don't really know. It's not something that you pay attention to. They just see diving catches and great throws. But maybe we will all start to notice some things differently this year in a good way.
And I mean, it's definitely a great point. I mean, I feel like not, I mean, they appreciate the snazzy plays, the diving catches, the great throws and everything, but the daily movement of, or play-by-play of the outfielders kind of moving about, making catches, communicating with each other. It's important. I mean, and especially late in a game. I mean, what do you talk about? Having a good defensive outfield late in a game, or having guys on the bench that can go in and substitute. And I don't think you necessarily need to do that with Nimmo, Bader, and Marte out there. And then certainly,
Absolutely.
hopefully, Marte bounces back and can, show the offense that everybody knows he's capable of as well. In the infield, I know Jeff McNeil just played his first spring training game. I know he was a little banged up. Had, well, somewhat of a down year for him. I know he hit 270 last year, but won the batting title in 22. So, I mean, what is the situation like for McNeil? Because I know he's played a little bit of outfield in the past. Where do you see him playing mostly and defensively at least? And do you see McNeil returning to what he was in 22 at the plate?
Yeah, he's so interesting, man. He's one of the more unique players I've ever watched because he's such a random hitter in a good way. He just puts the bat on the ball and kind of closes his eyes and it goes somewhere. 2 years ago, like you mentioned, it went everywhere. He hit 331, won the batting title, and then last year just didn't. It didn't fall for him. I mean, there are actually people saying, okay, there's no shift. Maybe will he hit 400 this year? And no, he hit 270. And he didn't have that much pop for extra bases, for home runs like he may have had in the past. But Jeff McNeil, to be successful, he needs to hit over 300. That is his value to the Mets. If he's hitting sub 300, it's hard to find the offensive value for Jeff McNeil. But defensively, the versatility, it is unmatched. I mean, teams would kill for a guy like him because he's probably going to be playing majority of second base. He can fill in at third. He's done that before, but you could also put him in the outfield. And that something that Carlos Mendoza actually mentioned last week is, hey, some nights I'll put, depending on matchups, a righty on the mound, a lefty on the mound. I'll put McNeil in left, and I'll move Nimmo to center if we have a righty on the mound and we want to sit Bader. Just that ability to have somebody play stellar second and stellar outfield is hard to find, and a lot of teams are looking for it. And the Mets are very happy that they have Jeff McNeil. He's such a random hitter that I don't think he'll do anything differently than he did last year. The balls just might start falling in because of just his approach at the plate.
Then you have guys like Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos, and I know the conversation has been, who's going to play third, who's going to DH? Do the Mets need to go out and get a DH like JD Martinez? I'll tell you though, Brett Beatty, I know it didn't have quite the distance against the Cardinals, but that was a moonshot that he hit last night there, just kind of like stood up there for a while. So I know they've both got the pop and they could play some defense, but how do you see that working out with Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos?
Yeah, for them, this is a big year. For Beatty, it shouldn't be make or break, but it kind of feels like that. And I think Mets fans have that kind of pressure on him. What I've noticed from those two is the kind of emotional maturity of, okay, I'm now in the major leagues. I don't have to fight and scratch and claw tooth and nail to make this team. I don't have to hit 350 in spring just to get everybody to notice me. And just that confidence and comfortability has allowed them to just be and just do. And that's what the Mets are dying for both Beatty and Vientos. The hardest thing to do in the majors is go from AAA to the majors and stick. Last year, we saw Brett Beatty's defense cave in, then his offense caved in, and then the whole thing swallowed in on itself. And he just wasn't himself. And the questions are, can he handle it? Can he figure it out? I saw this kid play in the minor leagues. He was one of the best natural hitters I've ever seen. So what's the difference? What's not translating? And I think it's the mental game. I think it's the mental edge, the confidence, and the swagger. And this year, when you have both of those guys, I mean, Vientos is Swaggy V, they call him. He's got plenty of swagger. When you give them a little bit of room and a little comfortability, hey, this job's yours for now, go do it. And then you don't have to worry about the pressure. You hope that just gets them comfortable. And then as they get comfortable, they can handle the pressure like they did in the minor leagues with intense games or playoff games at the minor league level. So I know that it's not something that Mets fans want to hear because they have the richest owner in sports. They want to put a fantasy team on the field every year. I get that,
Sure.
but it's unsustainable. You have to be able to play your young players, see what you have. And then for Vientos, he's had 274 plate appearances at the major league level. It is not enough of a sample size to make any kind of determination yet. So the Mets with David Stearns are giving those young guys a little bit of a leash. And it's their make or break year to take that leash and go run with it.
A couple other big players in the offense, obviously Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and another young player in Francisco Alvarez, who had a really good rookie season. And I think what impressed me more was his offense last year, and being obviously a good catcher or whatever, but his offensive numbers really popped. And I have a feeling that that'll just continue to, improve and improve. But with those three guys in particular, how much off of the offense will ultimately revolve around Alonso, Lindor, and Alvarez to kind of do their part to make sure that the Mets score runs and win some games.
Yeah, I mean the big thing with those that trio is just protection for Pete Alonso, which to be honest with you, at the end of the year last year in September, you look at that lineup the Mets were trotting out, and it was empty. But if you look at the 2024 projected opening day lineup, and Mets fans got an idea of that last night what it could look like, it is pretty deep. I mean, you have those three guys, but to really make those three guys more effective is to really surround the lineup 1 through 9. So, Nimmo will he continue to lead off? That makes it difficult to pitch to him because you have Lindor right behind him. And then Pete maybe hitting behind Lindor. But who's that protection for Alonso? And I think Alvarez, I do believe he takes that step forward. I know we talked about Vientos and Beatty, young guys mentally maturing for the majors. Alvarez has that mental makeup. He has had that mental makeup since he was born. And I think last year he just ran out of gas a little bit. He probably could have hit 30, 35 home runs in all seriousness. He just ran out of gas.
Hmm.
But I think he provides the protection for Pete this year, and that makes Pete even better because just in comparison to the September lineups where they didn't really have anybody batting behind Alonso. Pete was chasing more, trying to do too much. Teams would walk him, and then there'd be nothing behind him that they'd have to worry about. So protecting Pete is huge, and I think Alvarez can do that. Lindor went 30-30 last year, and what did we find out at the end of the year? He was hurt all year and still went 30-30, which is incredible. And so I do think, with some of the things coming out of camp, with David Stearns saying, these guys had some down years last year. Do you really believe they're all going to have down years this year? They're going to come back to their base level. And I think that's what they're all counting on. Because in Stearns' conversations with Lindor and Alonso in the offseason was, hey, David, we're still pretty good players. Like, don't count us out. And I think that a lot of people are, but baseball has a way of leveling out, and that's what the Mets are hoping for.
I want to switch over to pitching. I know the Mets, obviously, well, like a lot of other teams, love Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Um, and there were rumors that they were interested in Blake Snell. I know there were a lot of people chanting like, "Oh, hey, go sign this guy, go sign this guy." And also, as we sit here and speak, Jordan Montgomery is still a free agent. But the Mets did make a couple pitching additions, and hopefully, they're hoping that a couple of the guys they signed, in Luis Severino and Sean Manaea, bounce back from their injuries and their, tough seasons. I know Luis Severino spent most of last year either injured, and then it really took him until like late August, September to really try find something again. And he had that one start against the Nationals where he looked like vintage Severino, the guy that the Yankees had who almost won a Cy Young a few years ago. And he was frustrated. And one things that always impressed me about Severino was he's a gamer. He's a competitor. He's always going to go out there and give you 100%. He loved pitching with the Yankees. And I think he's going to be a great addition to a Mets staff. I was watching his start last week, I think against the Nationals or something like that. I know he was hitting 97. I'm like, all right, this looks like the old Luis Severino. This could be an even bigger addition for the Mets than many people thought. And then Sean Manaea looked pretty good against the Cardinals last night. And by the way, watching his pitching motion, it makes me think of somebody who was pitching when we were growing up, in Andy Pettit. Like just his windup and delivery. I'm like, that kind of looks like Andy Pettit. Both tall, both lefties and everything. And then I don't know, maybe Sean Manaea will raise down his cap like Pettit did and kind of give you that stare across the middle. But Manaea looked pretty good. Sevy looks good. I know they're without Kodai Senga for a little bit, but what do you think this rotation will look like and what is it capable of?
To be honest, I think the Mets are hoping for Severino to just channel anything he did in 17 and 18. And one of the big things, the results are important, hitting 97 and 98, bouncing back, feeling good for the next start to do the same thing. Just a matter of feeling good. And for Severino, healthy, they noticed that he had been in his previous spring trainings, maybe getting ramped up too late. They wanted him to ramp up a little quicker this time. They noticed that his sleep patterns were off. They wanted to fix
Hmm.
his sleep, which is something that is unique.
Sure.
And Severino simply said the other day that he's feeling like he did in 2018, which is lovely. The Mets
Oh
would
yeah.
love that. The question is with me, if he can channel that, can he give you 175 innings? I don't know. I don't know if he has the stamina to do that just because he's been so banged up
Yeah.
over the past few years. And then you have Sean Manaea, who the Mets were very interested in some of the developments that he made late. He went to the Giants last year, went to Driveline, which is a basically a company that helps pitchers throw harder, and he just turned up the velocity. And at the end of last year, he added a sweeper that I've seen so far get some really nasty swing and miss stuff. And so the Mets are hoping and believing in that. But as a general rule, even with Senga not even in the mix, I think the Mets are looking at a very boring, unsexy, but reliable starting rotation. When you have guys like Yoshinobu Yamamoto out there who maybe give you an ERA of 1.7 or an ERA of 2, that's great. But if you have a rotation that gives you an ERA of 4, which is again not amazing, that's a quality start. That's 2 runs over 6. That keeps you in the game. What's the separator? The bullpen, which I think the Mets have done really well to build. So I think that they're hoping for this rotation to simply be reliable, have a high floor instead of a high ceiling. It's great to go 7 shutout innings, but 2 runs over 6, I think anyone will take that. And that's what the Mets are hoping for this year.
How much do you think the bullpen has improved? Obviously, I know Diaz being back is a big time improvement at the end of games, but overall, what do you think the Mets bullpen will end up looking like in terms of setup men, middle relief, those swing type of pitchers?
Yeah, so Diaz being back is huge. I mean, he had an electric first outing back in spring training, and he just made hitters look silly. And I think that the feeling and the vibe, again, the baseball is a lot about the vibe. Vibes were down when Edwin got hurt last year. He's back. Ninth inning is secured. He'll handle that. Mets have some guys coming back. Brooks Raley, a lefty specialist. Adam Ottavino is returned. Hopefully, he'll have a little bit of a better year than he did last year. And they have added lefty Jake Diekman, who I think that's a nice addition. He's somebody that has always been kind of on the lookout during trade deadline as a playoff piece for a team. And then they brought in this Japanese pitcher named Shintaro Fujinami, who I do like. He throws 103, and they would love to be the team that figures out how to get him to throw it over the plate,
Right.
which is sometimes something that he struggles with. But if he's on and the guy's throwing 103, you have no chance. Mets actually saw him last year twice, and when he came into the bullpen with the Orioles at the end of the year, he was on, and the Mets had no chance. And so that's kind of what you're taking a flyer on. And then Jorge Lopez they brought in has some nasty stuff. He's an old starter turned reliever, former All-Star. Drew Smith is back. He doesn't have to pitch in his super high leverage positions that he had to last year, and I still think that might make him even more effective. And then guys with different looks, like a Michael Tonkin, who come from a weird righty 3/4 slot. I think it's a unique bullpen. You're not really seeing the same arm twice, and they're guys that have pitched in big leverage spots before. So very excited to see how this works to lead up to Edwin Diaz, whose job it is to nail it down.
And the horns are back too.
Yes, absolutely. The trumpets have returned back
The
to
trumpets,
City
yeah.
Field, and they played it. They played it at Clover Park
Oh
for
yeah.
that first game back, and it was cool. It was chills, even in the spring training game just a couple weeks ago. So it's very excited to actually, last year was my first year. I haven't heard the trumpets at City Field, so I'm very excited for that this year.
Oh, that's right. Keith, going into the season, I'll close up with this. What we've talked obviously about all facets of the team with the Mets, but what do you think projection wise they're capable of? Obviously, I think a lot of teams are chasing the Dodgers, including their own division, but the Mets are in a tough division as well, following Atlanta and Philadelphia, Miami, who made the playoffs as well. With the additions the Mets did make, what do you think going into the season that they're capable of? Can they get into the playoffs as a possible wild card team and maybe make a little bit of a run? Or do you think that this is let's see what happens kind of year and then they'll build on it next year?
Yeah, until the bullpen was put together, there were some late moves, getting Diekman in, getting Fujinami, and that's when I thought, okay, maybe the word competitive that I've heard from the Mets, maybe they really do think they can make the playoffs. And again, when you look at that lineup top to bottom, we were wondering, would Marte be healthy? He seems to be feeling healthy. McNeil is feeling good. Alvarez is back. Beatty and Vientos seem like okay, they're starting to play better. And Alonso's going into a year where there's a lot of money on the table for him to see what he's going to do. So I do think that I'm sort of bullish on the team that goes maybe 4 or 5 games over 500, 83 and 79, 85 and 77, puts themselves in a position where, like last year, like you said, the Marlins made it in. They're probably not going to win the division. That's for the Braves to do. Phillies are amazing as well, but you don't have to win the division. You just have to get into the playoffs. There's some wild card chances out there for you. Dodgers are tough. They'll win that division potentially. Arizona's going to fight them for it. The Giants just signed Blake Snell. They're going for it. But there are openings and there are availabilities. And I think the Mets might surprise some people. We'll see how the expectation game goes. Last year, expectations were super high and the results flat. Expectations this year are a little muted. Even Steve Cohen, the owner, said that he's looking to the upside, even though expectations are low. But I do think that it will be a competitive year. The Marlins down the stretch last year, when you're in a chase for that last wild card spot, it's fun. The games are fun. It's an
Yeah,
exciting chase. And I think for Mets fans, it's going to be a year where they're in it and it's an exciting chase. And I'm looking forward to that.
outstanding. Can't wait to watch it happen. Keith, appreciate your time in breaking down the New York Mets and have fun to begin this opening season. Mets open up at home next Thursday and a 6-game homestand to start the year. So, Keith, appreciate the time.
Thanks, Ben. Always good to talk Mets.
That is Keith Raad, New York Mets radio broadcast. You can hear him all season long with Howie Rose on WCBS 880. Thanks for watching Sports Talk. I am Vin Ebenau. We'll talk to you next time.